girls. Welcome to the third clip of Startup Psychology. And today I want to talk to you about cognitive biases and heuristic when it comes to making decisions. So, how we make irrational decisions almost on a daily basis, and how we easily fooled and guided, baited into doing so. Before we do that, the last time I asked you to choose a subscription for this, in this case, The Economist, but it works for any other kind of subscription models or even products, right? And the people who were born on a even date, they had to choose between a standard subscription for 59, where they just get like a paper version, or they can get paper and web access for 125. And that's pretty straightforward, and that's pretty much based on preference. That's why I instructed you to think of just having money at your disposal, so that buying a subscription is not really a pain for you. On the other hand, though, the people that were born on an odd number, like on the first of a month, or the third, or the fifth, or the seventh, the ninth, and so on, you get it. They had actually three options. They had, the same options as the group who were born on an even number, but they had an additional option where they could just get a print subscription. Let me just mark it really quickly here. I have a marking tool somewhere. They had this option here extra, the one in the middle, right? And the crux here is, so I hope this disappears again, that this option is 125 and it's just print, although there's an option that gives you print and web for the same price. So basically, those two options are identical in price, but the option on the bottom beats the shit out of this option in the middle. So what happens, what I hope, and what happened in the last couple of years, let me just see if the tool just disappears, is something like this. So group A, left-hand side, let me just jump back, just had two versions, right? There was like somewhat like a 60-40 split. Of course, those results are nowhere representative, right? It's just like only 10 people did their survey, and it's like one class. Then we have one class, or we have one cohort of students, which is you, but they're divided into three classes. And this is the results from one of those classes. You can also see that more people did it for it was not an even split that it in class, but whatever. So 60-40 in favor of just the standard subscription. However, when we introduced the print subscription for 125, so the option that is asymmetrically dominated by the print and web for 125, more people, and that's the crux of this so-called decoy effect, I haven't said that yet, more people chose the more expensive print and web subscription package for 125. The reason is that, relatively speaking, this more comprehensive package looks more attractive because it asymmetrically dominates this one option. And of course, one student totally didn't get what's going on and just chose the print subscription, which is it's straightforward, irrational, because you can have more for the same amount of money that you invest, right? But the crux is actually what happens between the groups, right? It's like the crux is that more people, relatively speaking, chose option B, right? Chose the more expensive package, which is, from a producer standpoint, if you're a startup who wants to sell something, if you want to, sell some products as a tech company, if you want to sell a subscription as a, online website, you name it, right? That's what you want to do. You want, because the margin tends to be bigger on the not always true per se, right? But you want to steer customers into the direction of buying the product that gives you the biggest margin. And that's what the decoy effect is perfect for. So I just wanted to show you a way how people can not just influence the prices, but also the way that their products are presented to make you, go towards a certain, choice. So that's the decoy effect that we talked about. It's like a specific change in preference between two options when the third option, the decoy, is presented, which is asymmetrically dominated. And in this case here, it's pretty straightforward because there was only one feature, right? It's like this type of subscription. But of course, if you say you want to buy a card and you just there's so many features that you could use decoys on, right? Not just price or color, but also like engine size or, seating possibilities, access to doors, whatever not, right? And you could play around with all those kind of features. And of course, that's why marketing tests and product research is so important, because they have to ask, thousands of people to figure out what happens when things are not asymmetrically, clearly one-sidedly dominated, right? So in this case, if we have three options, option B might be better than option A on one feature, but option A might be better on another feature compared to option B, and then it gets more complicated, but still this effect is applicable. Just keep that in mind, because this, I think, is one of the coolest things. It's also something you could maybe potentially use when it comes to the assignment. I'm a big fan of this one. But here I have another question for you. Let me just move this up because the software is not smart enough to not block this. The question that I have is, I want you to answer what Bob does. So you know the game, go to menti.com, it's menti.com, and just enter the code that's printed here. It's 297577. And what you will see there, I'll just keep talking, but you can do it in parallel, or you can do it after. But just do it now. I'm gonna grab a water, and you have the time. Please go there, put in the code. Hopefully everything works. And what you will see is this. Bob is an opera fan who enjoys touring art museums when on holiday. As a child, he also enjoyed playing chess with family members and friends. What is Bob? Bob is A, and you have to make a choice. I'm back in a second. Please make that choice. Sweet. So, of course, I'm just gonna reveal it here, and I'm also gonna use the numbers that I had, the numbers of people that filled it in last year, just because we have like this time delay, and I think it's better to do it here than in class. But you can also, if you have questions, again, right, keep that in mind. Make a note. Ask me when we actually are meeting on Wednesday. This is the outcome. So people tend to choose the option of Bob being a trumpet player, professional trumpet player. So of course there's no right or wrong answers because we don't know Bob, right? He might well be. But statistically speaking, and I just, arbitrarily run the numbers here for the United States, there's 112 symphony orchestras in the United States that are full on state sponsored, that are lucrative, that make money. And each of the symphony orchestras has 3 to 4 professional trumpet players. So let's say, 3 to 4 times 112. Let's say there's 500 people in the United States that really make a living out of professionally playing the trumpet in an orchestra, right? However, as compared to, those 500, there's 3.2 million farmers. And I would bet my left little finger that there's some farmers that actually, enjoy music, enjoy going to the opera, do those kind of things. Of course, not all of those 3.2 million, but the numbers that still that fit the criteria that presented before, right, might ultimately be bigger than playing a trumpet. It's just our mental, we form this mental stereotype of Bob by hearing the description, and we have another one of those fallacy coming up right now without me asking you to judge anything. But this mental image is so strong that we just categorize Bob based on, what we think it is. But if we really sit down and use type 2 thinking, remember Kahneman from the first clip, we would kind of, hold on a second, statistically speaking, maybe just based on the difference in size of those populations, right? Like 500 professional players versus 3.2 million professional farmers. Maybe based on those numbers, it's actually more likely, also anchoring, right, that he's a farmer instead of a trumpet player. So keep that in mind, and it becomes more clear here, right? So the fallacy that you might have fallen prey to, and of course, ultimately, we don't know if you did or not because that was an arbitrary example. Bob might well be a professional player, right? Bob doesn't exist. But the fallacy that you fell to, if you did, right, for the sake of learning something, is called the representative heuristic. So basically, I'm just going to read it out, right? We assess similarity of objects and organize them around category prototypes, like the orchestra player. The degree to which an event is similar in essential characteristics to its parent population and reflects the salient features by which it is generated. So, and there are certain fallacies, this again is also like overconfidence we talked about in the first clip. This is also an umbrella term, right? There's different kind of heuristics involved and decision-making, biases that fit the representative heuristic. So for instance, one is the base rate fallacy. So there's a cool quote that you can look up by Laplace. It's a mathematician. And he says, or he describes a situation in a village where you're a farmer and you're expecting a child, right? And you want a little boy for whatever reason, right? To take on your household after you die or whatever. And you watch anxiously as there's a lot of little boys born around you. Because deep down you think there's so many boys born already, right? Maybe that influences if I have a boy or not. Because there's already boys. Whatever. Of course, biologically speaking, it doesn't make too much sense, although there is some mechanisms that are like just being explored as we speak. There might be some indication that birth rates are actually, codependent on other birth rates. But for the sake of this argument, we could assume it's a coin flip if it's a boy or a girl, and it should not be dependent or predicated on other birth rates. However, you make this, subconscious connection. Also, the gambler's fallacies, right? I pulled the arm on the one-armed bandit 50 times and I didn't win. Next time I have to win. Again, here those machines have, by law, at least in the Netherlands, have to have a certain win probability. It's usually in the 30%. But technically, mathematically speaking, and for the sake of argument, the outcome of game number 1 should be independent for the outcome of game number 2. So it's the gambler's fallacy. Now the last one is the conjunction fallacy, and there's also a very practical application of it. And I see my face is blocking it again, but I think you're used to it now. It's called the Linda heuristic. And this is somewhat similar to Bob, but Linda is, just picture Linda, right, in your mind. She's 31 years old, she's single, she's very vocal and outspoken, she's a smart person, she's very bright. She majored in philosophy. When she was a student at a university, she was concerned with, social justice issues. She fought against discrimination. She also participated in demonstrations against nuclear power. And now the question is, I'm going to read it out because I'm blocking it. What is more probable? Think of the word. What is more probable? Linda's a bank teller, right? Or is it Linda's a bank teller and she's active in the feminist movement? So, and again, right, I think by now you're not that easily fooled, but in class last year, trust me, I had still people not wanting to believe that it's in fact not option A, but option B. You can see that those two statements are related, right? And if you would draw it out, I'll try. Let's see how much space I have on there. No, I don't. I'll try to draw it out here. It's just quite logically, right? If this is the amount of all bank tellers, right? There's a small subsection. This is answer category B. This is answer category A, right? So all the bank tellers, yeah, some of them will be active in the feminist movement, but by definition, right, the maximum probability is 1. And unless those two circles are equal, that all bank tellers are active in the feminist movement, and even then A and B would be equally correct, it must be answer A, based on very, very simple statistical thinking, probability mathematics. I think it's straightforward. But yet still, even now, even knowing what we've talked about for the last 3 to 4 minutes, there's this little voice in our heads telling us, hey, but this fits so nicely. It fits the stereotype that we formed that she's also doing this and that. And she might well be, but it's just mathematically impossible to be more likely. That's why I did the ugly drawings on top there. All right, so that's the representative heuristic. And another quite common one, let me just try if I can, yes, is what's called the availability heuristic. And I adapted it a little bit with Corona here, right? But it's also this idea that, of course, we are, agents of our environment. That brings us back also to clip number 1. Meaning that we form our mind, we form our opinions, we form what we believe based on, what we encounter in the daily lives. However, what we encounter in the daily lives is also pre-selected, right? So it's not rocket science, and I think most of you, like early 20s and older, they know that the media, for instance, has what's called a negativity bias. It's also, not a decision-making bias, but it's also a cognitive bias. That means that negative news are more likely to be actually shown on the news. And the reason for it is not like that they are negative, it's just like it sells better in the sense that we have an, evolutionary adapted mechanism to pay attention to the things that are bad around us. And the reason for it is that, the bad things are the things that might actually kill us. Whereas the good things, they're just an enrichment, they're luxury. They're really nice, they're really good, they're really important, right? They're essential too, but they're not going to kill us. And evolutionary speaking, it makes sense to stay away from things that kill us. So we pay attention to things that are very negative. And the news is an application of that, right? It's like we see things in the world that are bad. We don't see the good things. We don't see the million lives saved. We don't see technology improvements. Of course, we can look for it. And there's even websites that just specialize on good news. If you just Google, I'm not going to share a link here, but if you Google it, you'll find something like this, and it's pretty cool, right? But so, for instance, in the Corona news, we only talk about there's also selection issue, right? We just only talk about the people that die. We do not talk about the people that recover, which is by far the vast majority, right? Like right now, as we speak, the World Health Organization, as I do this recording, they of course said like that the mortality rate is something like 3.4%, which is, and I hope you're all healthy and your families are healthy. Which is a pretty, it's a pretty significant number. That's a lot of people, right? But obviously, first of all, that implies that that number is prone to a selection bias to begin with. If you think back one clip, and I think you know why, we don't need to go down on this problem. But we don't speak about the 96.6% that recover, right? So it's like, if we talk about them more, maybe we wouldn't see it as it is still life-threatening, but as dangerous as it is. And I don't want to make fun of it. That's not my intention. There's always two sides of a story, but we pay attention to one side more than the other, the negative side. And we make decisions based on how easy something comes to mind. And if we're constantly bombarded, with topics such as Corona, but also, like startup failures or, ever hear tobacco and alcohol abuse, yada, 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 we form wrong impressions, right? So for instance, when, terrorism was so prone after the 9/11 attacks and there was hardly anything else on the news, we're like living in constant fear of falling prey to, the terrorist attack. But statistically speaking, right, if you want to be like a machine, very rational, it's more likely to be slain by a piece of furniture in your house, to fall over a chair and die, than being, slain by a terrorist attack. It's even more likely to die from a coconut falling on your head if you're on a tropical vacation than falling prey to a terrorist attack. However, like, we don't think this way, right? The classic example in the literature you will find is like, yes, we have, coverage of airplane accidents, right? Like last year, famously due to, the news. But driving in a car is like, it's manifold more dangerous from a, mortality standpoint. And still no one is afraid of getting into the car and driving around. However, some people feel anxious when the airplane is about to start and land. Makes sense what I'm saying, right? Just because it comes easy to mind, all those pictures of airplanes crashing, being shot down and whatnot, make it appear more dangerous than it actually is, statistically speaking. I'm not speaking about emotions or what you feel. You're very entitled to those kind of things, but you catch the drift, I think. Right, and the last big one I want to talk about is probably the biggest bias and also like the most influential bias. It's called the confirmation bias. So if you Google it, would say something like favors information that support your previously held beliefs, but it's way more complex than that, right? It's this idea that we selectively look for information that confirm what we already think is true. And what we think is true, like everything we talked to this point, is like we know objectively very little. Right? It's all filtered through, our eyes, our mind, our brain, our emotions, our feelings, our environment, who we are as people, etc. Right? We've learned that so far. And so we basically are very prone to making very, very bad decisions based on not frequenting all the information that's there. That's why big companies have something like a devil's advocate, or people that actively, that's their job, to form an opposing opinion, just to see what happens to pro, right? To not, enter this kind of tunnel vision and just, believe and confirm ourselves, by reading the first piece of information that confirms what we already believe. That's what this comic is trying to represent, and it's also a comic on a website that I'll share with you for an exercise class. That's pretty cool. You could Google it already. It's called Benson, Benson, and it's cognitive cheat sheet. It's a cool read, like a 5-minute read on Medium.com. Highly recommend it. Check it out if you like to. So I'd like to tell you right now, for instance, that, how can I put it? First impressions, for instance, don't matter, right? But first impressions are, so to speak, an anchor for confirmation bias. So let's say you start a new job at a startup, right? And you just sit there on your first day and, like, you're a good-looking young lady, and you sit there and you try coding or whatever, and this guy walks over and gives you a cup of coffee, right? And then the way you interpret this behavior, right? Is it a creepy dude, or, is he just a nice colleague, or does he try to, sexually approach me? Will probably influence all the future encounters you have with this person. So if the first impression you form with this person is bad, tough luck on him or her. Makes sense, right? So extremely powerful. And the last one, and I think I'll stop the slides here. I have more slides actually, but I stopped the recording after this one. Is a graph that I'll give you 2 hints, and I'll ask you in the actual lecture on Wednesday what you think this is about. Shows a graph of consent percentages of people. So people were asked if they would agree to do something for different countries across the world. In this case, it's Europe. So Denmark, it's very low. In the Netherlands, it's very low, and it's old. So I'll give you another hint. So by now, I think the number in the Netherlands is actually closer to the 90. In the UK, it's 70%. Germany, 12%. And you could say, like, for instance, in Austria, it's almost 100%, and in other countries too. You could say that Germany and Austria are culturally very similar. Same for, of course, there's differences, right? Same for the Netherlands and Belgium. However, on the one hand, 27% of people agree, whereas almost 98% of people agree. My question is, what do you think those numbers represent, those bars represent, and which bias might I'm talking about here? And with that, I actually leave you a little bit earlier today. So thanks for listening in, guys.